Hi, this is Colin Hung with Healthcare IT Today. And today I'm sitting down with Donna Scott, Senior Vice President at Spoke. Donna, thank you for joining me. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Now, Donna, I am very excited to sit down with you because back in the few months ago, Spoke conducted a survey of healthcare folks and found some very interesting results as it related to communications. Is that right?
Yes, we did. And actually, we do a survey once a year. We've done it since 2011. And it always has interesting learnings from doing this survey.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. I mean, I was only familiar with this year, but when I looked back at some of the other ones, it was interesting how you had done the comparisons, and we'll dive into that.
Okay, good.
But one of the things I wanted to, so maybe before I dive into my questions, can you maybe just give us a quick, overview of who you surveyed and what the survey, the parameters of that survey?
Sure. We had this year, the survey was broader than it has been in the past. It was really all about healthcare communications in general.
Mm-hmm.
And the scope was relatively broad. It included some questions in relation to communications during the pandemic and how the hospitals and health systems have learned about communications more during this pandemic and what's worked and what hasn't. So it was a pretty broad survey to measure what's working, what's not, what are they using, what are they not using, and trends and workflows.
So one of the interesting results that I found in the survey was this particular stat. So you found that 31% of respondents believe that a single platform for communications would improve things at their hospital.
Yes.
To me, this implies that there's still a lot of best of breed approaches going on in terms of communications. They may have multiple vendors, multiple styles of devices and everything. So
Yes.
do you think that, based on the survey results or just based on what you know, are things starting to change now where people are realizing maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want this sort of single platform, single approach to communications across my hospital?
Yes, it is changing. And although you're right that the survey indicated 31% who saw the single platform as improving, there was another very important statistic from the research that was 92% of the respondents saw a need for a single communications platform. And I think it completely reflects the fact that today there are so many disjointed communication systems out there within a single hospital, and that therefore the disjointed solutions create disjointed communications, which obviously can adversely impact patient care. And it's becoming more and more evident, even more so now than ever, as a result of what we've seen with the pandemic and COVID this year.
So let's maybe, for our listeners and for the article I'm going to write, when you say disjointed communications, can you give an example of that?
Sure. So what we see a lot in hospitals is that there are departments who have implemented their own communications platform or solution. And often it is just a simple secure texting solution or a simple alarm management solution. And what happens when you have those types of departmental or separate solutions throughout a hospital is those then do not integrate or connect with each other. And that breaks the communications within the hospital. So what the need is for this single communications platform that covers the entire broad spectrum of communications in the hospital, including the contact centers, including secure messaging, but also including things like alarm and alerting, as well as workflows. So the disjointed solutions that you see so much today are definitely causing issues, and more, I think that the CIOs and CMIOs especially see the opportunity to simplify and improve care with a single platform.
Okay. So Donna, were you surprised? Because I certainly was, at another result from the survey, and that was like during this COVID pandemic, that email was the most used for hospital-wide communication. I mean, by far, the bar chart in the graph you had was way out here, and everything else was pretty small. So, were you surprised that email is still the preferred way of communicating with staff internally at the hospital?
Well, I have to say I wasn't really surprised because obviously we work with them day in and day out. But it is disappointing, Colin, because what I continue to see in hospitals and health systems is that they either don't have the budget or they don't have the capability to be able to implement technology that will be so much more effective for them and so much more efficient for them. And so it is a continued source of some frustration that we can't enable them better with better communications kinds of solutions. Because I mean, what I'd like more than anything in the world is if they could take advantage of these capabilities where if you just push one button on a smartphone or on your contact center console, and it can completely automate a workflow or a alerting of a particular sepsis response team or whatever it may be. There's so many opportunities, right, to enhance that communication so that they can provide better care. So although I wasn't surprised, it's still a little disappointing. We gotta keep making progress, and I know that we will.
It is funny. I mean, every year we hear about the death of fax machines, and this is finally the year that we're going to get off of them. And I feel email is starting to fall into that category. This is the year we're going to use less email and use some other things, and yet it continues to be such a popular and also well used way to communicate internally at an organization.
Yep.
Now, Donna, you've mentioned a word a couple of times here, and I may want to explore that with you. You've mentioned the word contact center a few times. Now, when I think about contact center, I'm thinking like a bunch of people, phone agents sitting behind a desk and answering the phones and everything. I'm not getting the sense that's not what you mean when you say contact center.
No, but your understanding tends to be a norm that I think folks who have not seen how they operate in a call center tend to have. And really what it amounts to is the contact centers in the hospitals and health systems are absolutely the backbone of communications. They are so critical. And one of the things that our survey did highlight, and the respondents highlighted, I think it was 2/3 of them indicated that they see contact centers as being integral to creating that patient experience and enhancing the patient journey. So more and more, contact centers are being seen as the valuable asset that they really are to hospitals and health systems and to patients. And so when you think about that, they are really in the middle of every code call, every patient call. They are, during the pandemic, they became the virtual front line. They moved to remote work, and the contact center operators became absolutely a virtual front line for everyone all in the hospital. So I'm very passionate about the fact that contact center software and capabilities are so critical to, again, just better patient care because of how they can facilitate the clinician getting the information they need when they need it on the right device.
I have to say that having come from that world a little bit, I think contact centers had a telehealth moment this year.
Yes.
in the sense of I just remember how reticent people were about letting operators and agents work from home in a place where they couldn't be observed, they couldn't be watched. And yet when this pandemic hit, all of a sudden that became the only option. And all of a sudden some of the, not all of the concerns evaporated. It was like, oh, people are just as productive at home as they are in the office. And with the right protocols and software and tools in place, we can ensure that there's security and privacy and everything. And there's no more danger than if they were here in the office. That became all of a sudden a necessity in order for these contact centers to continue operating.
It was, and we were able to help. Obviously we have a lot of hospitals who use our contact center software, and we were able to really expedite their ability to move those operations to work from home. And it made a huge difference. And those contact center operators or representatives are absolutely the backbone of the communication in a hospital.
Now, one of the other things in your survey was, and again, it's a little bit surprising for me, was that people were worried about moving apps to the cloud, and I think it was specifically around these a cloud-based contact center, I believe. But do you have any indication of why there was such a, like, I think it was over 2/3 of people said they were worried about moving apps to the cloud. Why do you think this was the case?
So, what was interesting about this research, Colin, was that yes, that particular question, there were 2/3 who responded they were worried about and had concerns about moving technology to the cloud. I think that's absolutely a reasonable response right now in the midst of what we're seeing in cybersecurity and ransomware attacks. I think that there is a heightened sense of concern, and there are conflicting opinions about how to drive the most secure technology in that hospital and health system. So, number one, I think that was a very reasonable response. But number two, I would say, if you read further into the research, there were some other questions that shed a little bit more light. And that was that the IT personnel responded to the questions with much less worry than the clinicians who were respondents to the survey. So about 67% reported there wasn't an app that they wouldn't want to move to the cloud. And of the IT respondents, 37% said that they were not worried at all. So what we've got here is heightened sense of concern, heightened security concerns, absolutely reasonable, but different opinions on how to get it. And my opinion is what the research was said to me is that we've got work to do. The work we have to do is to provide more of the facts and information to clinicians and to CMIOs and CIOs of hospitals and health systems about the security in the cloud and the capabilities of the cloud. It's absolutely reasonable that they'd be concerned right now, but what we have to do is we have to provide the facts about the security in the hospital on-prem environment versus the security in the cloud. And there have been many studies that would show that the security in the cloud is actually better. It's actually better. So lots of work to do, totally heightened concerns as well it should be. Just a very difficult environment right now from a cybersecurity standpoint.
So let me ask. So funny. I was just thinking in my head that maybe the cloud folks need to take a page out of vaccines and kind of go, well, we have a group of people who are kind of resisting and kind of afraid of them. What can we do to convince them that it is safe and it is advisable and it's a good thing? And it almost seems like that's the kind of campaign we have to mount with cloud and cybersecurity and everything.
I agree.
So let me ask this question, Donna. Like, is there anything that surprised you the most from the survey?
Well, I think there were two things. One was a pleasant surprise, and the other was maybe not as pleasant a surprise. The pleasant surprise to me was what I talked about before, that it was clearly recognized the role of the contact center in the patient journey or patient experience. So there were something like 2/3 who recognized that. And they are somewhat these unsung heroes, right? So that was surprising, but in a pleasant way. On the other side, we keep seeing the continued use of unsecure or personal devices for sharing PHI. I think it was 82% of the respondents indicated they were concerned that PHI is still being shared potentially via these unsecured tools. And, I don't know it's just going to take more time. And the recognition that there are there are ways to address this that are not going to cause the workflow issues that what clinicians are afraid of. So my hypothesis is that clinicians are, because of the experience they've had with EHRs, they are still concerned that when given a technology, it's going to mess with their workflows. It's going to cost them more work, right? And the fact of the matter is that communications platforms, if they are built correctly, if they're cloud native, if they are built with physician input in mind, if they are built with the ground up and the integration in them, they're going to enhance the workflows. They're not going to cause that problem. And so I think, again, our work is to educate, to assure that they understand there are answers, there are solutions to the problem of sharing PHI that will not get in the way of their workflows.
I love it. We often talk here at the desk around how technology should fit into workflow as opposed to dictate the workflow, because we've seen the experience, as you just said, with EHRs, and the rightful resistance to that mode of operating now. If done correctly, it should be seamless. It sounds like that's really what you're saying here as well with the communications platforms.
Yes.
And you said at the beginning of our conversation that you've done this survey for a number of years. What's sort of the biggest change from prior surveys that you've seen now looking at this over time?
One of the things that struck me about this year, it's clear that paging is still a mainstay, right, in hospitals and health systems. And people who don't understand the difference in the paging network versus the SMS network or smartphone network, they don't quite understand that. They think, oh, outdated technology, what the heck are they doing? The bottom line is that the pagers are still offering a extremely reliable, a high coverage. There aren't coverage issues with paging the way there are with SMS, right? And we've got a lot of hospitals with basements that, just you can't get the signals, et cetera. And then the battery operation and the ability to have your pagers work when nothing else does in the midst of crises. What we found in the survey this year was that the encrypted paging has received very notable growth. And so when you look at overall the amount of paging that is still happening, it's been very consistent actually since 2011. But what's happened is the paging for encrypted pagers has increased while the others have decreased a little bit, so that the overall has remained consistent. So again, you've got these folks in hospitals and health systems that see the economy, that see the reliability of this particular tool for them, and they see how it can enable them to have encrypted PHI. They can use them for PHI with encrypted pagers, and they can solve some problems that they have. That was to me a change in this particular research this year around the encrypted paging.
So let's look ahead a little bit. If you and I are sitting down a year from now and we're talking about next year's survey,
yes,
what do you anticipate will we be talking about?
I am so looking forward to a post-COVID era. Aren't you, Colin?
I'm totally with you on that one. Yes, I hope we're talking about COVID in the rearview mirror at that point.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So I really, what we're hearing from our customers is clear that they obviously cannot focus on much else right now, rightly so, than what they're doing with COVID. The telehealth, the digital transformation, et cetera, they're doing what they have to do to get through this very difficult environment. What they're telling us is that the minute they can, they are going to be wanting to enable a single platform for communications. They see this coordinated communications need being greater than ever now because of what they've learned through this pandemic. So what I see happening is that there'll be some pent-up demand, if you will, for some of these kinds of capabilities that they haven't been able to take advantage of because of their need to focus on COVID for the past year. I do think that we are at a kind of a pivot point in hospitals and health systems where that, because we've had the innovation we've had during COVID, and because we've seen such an adoption of virtual health and patient engagement, I think we just got a shot in the arm, no pun intended, for patients to become a much stronger advocate in their own care, and for new technology and for new innovation. I'm very excited about it. I'm excited about what we can do, those of us who are in healthcare IT, what we can do to help enable better care as we come out of COVID, and we see the opportunities we can help out clinicians.
Donna, a final question. Where can people go to find the survey and find out more information about Spoke?
That's easy. It's spoke.com. And the research is the Healthcare Communication Survey e-brief that is on the resources nav of spoke.com. So we hope that they take a look. It's really some interesting information. And it was over.
It really was.
It was over 600, did I say there were over 600 healthcare professionals, which was higher than our usual respondents.
Well, I mean, that's also a function of, hey, this is not a webinar, so I will totally do this for 5 minutes to give you an opinion.
Yes, I think you're right. Yeah.
Well, Donna, I do hope that when we sit down next year to talk about your survey that we are looking behind us in terms of COVID. But thank you so much for taking the time today. It was really fun to kind of explore a little bit more of these numbers and the results that you got. And thank you for being on the program today.
Thank you so much, Colin. Look forward to talking with you again.
This is Colin Hung at Healthcare IT Today. Thanks for listening.